of Rimac Automobili that will see electric supercar maker raising $157 to $181 million. Its owner, Mate Rimac, has been quoted as saying this. Porsche owns 15.5% stake in Rimac Automobili and could raise its stake. Rimac has developed an electric supercar platform which it supplies to other car makers.
What if the greatest hypercar rivalry in history wasn't won on the racetrack, but in the boardroom? For years, Bugatti and Koenigsegg battled for speed and engineering supremacy, each pushing the limits of what a production car could achieve. Then an unexpected challenger arrived. Rimac didn't just break records with electric performance. It quietly positioned itself to reshape the entire industry. Now, after Porsche's shocking exit, Mate Rimac controls Bugatti's future, while his technology powers some of Koenigsegg's own machines. Has the balance of power permanently changed? Let's break down the rivalry, Porsche's exit, and Rimac's rise. The hypercar rivalry that changed everything. Some rivalries get manufactured by marketing departments. This one wasn't. Bugatti built its modern reputation on a simple, almost stubborn idea. Combine absurd horsepower with old-world craftsmanship, and let the numbers speak for themselves. The Veyron did it first, redefining what a production car could achieve. The Chiron pushed it further. And the Tourbillon, Bugatti's newest flagship, now heading toward its first customer deliveries.
This is where you come to buy a £5 million car. It's Bugatti's private chateau, and I'm here to spec my perfect tourbillon, exactly like a real customer would.
Takes a completely different mechanical approach to get there. An 8.3-liter naturally aspirated V16, paired with a trio of electric motors, producing a combined 1,775 horsepower and a claimed top speed of 277 miles per hour. No turbochargers at all. In an era where nearly everyone else has gone smaller and boosted, Bugatti went the other direction entirely. Koenigsegg approached the same mountain from a completely different trail. Where Bugatti leaned on legacy and outright spectacle, the Swedish manufacturer built its identity on relentless, almost obsessive engineering originality, inventing components other manufacturers wouldn't even attempt, chasing acceleration and top speed records with a kind of single-minded focus that turned Christian von Koenigsegg into something close to a folk hero among enthusiasts. For a long stretch, if you wanted the fastest production car on the planet, Koenigsegg's name was usually somewhere near the top of that conversation. Look at the engineering choices each brand made, and the philosophical gap becomes obvious. Bugatti's answer to complexity has always been to build something almost unreasonably elaborate and make it work anyway. A 16-cylinder engine married to 3 electric motors, built with the kind of watchmaker precision that gives the tourbillon its name. Koenigsegg's answer, meanwhile, has often been to strip a problem down to its purest form and solve it with an invention nobody else had considered: a camless engine, a 9-speed gearbox built like nothing else on the market, a differential designed from scratch rather than adapted from an existing platform. Two completely different definitions of engineering excellence, both aimed at the exact same summit. Neither brand needed the other to survive, but they needed each other to matter in quite the same way. Every time Koenigsegg claimed a new top speed record, Bugatti fans quietly wondered when Molsheim would respond. Every time Bugatti unveiled something as audacious as the tourbillon, Koenigsegg's engineers had a fresh benchmark to aim past. It became an unspoken contest fought almost entirely through spec sheets and record attempts, rather than a boardroom or a courtroom. And then there was Rimac. For years, treated more like an ambitious outsider than a genuine contender in that fight. A Croatian company, founded by a guy who started out converting an old BMW into an electric race car in his garage. Rimac didn't have a century of heritage to lean on, and it wasn't chasing combustion engine glory. It built its case entirely on electric performance, and it built it fast enough that both Bugatti and Koenigsegg eventually had to take it seriously. What almost nobody expected was that this outsider wouldn't just join the rivalry from the sidelines. It would eventually end up controlling one half of it directly, while simultaneously outperforming the other half on the numbers that mattered most. There's something almost cinematic about that trajectory if you actually trace it from the beginning. A guy tinkering with an old BMW in a garage, laughed at for building what people called a washing machine on wheels, ends up founding a company that not only competes with two of the most storied names in performance engineering, it eventually gets invited to sit at the table with both of them and then ends up owning a seat at one side of that table entirely. To understand how that happened, you have to go back to a decision Porsche made 5 years ago, and the one it just made to undo it. When Porsche stepped aside. Back in 2021, Porsche and Rimac Group formed a joint venture called Bugatti-Rimac, designed to house the legendary Bugatti brand under a new kind of ownership structure. Rimac Group held the majority stake at 55%. Porsche took the remaining 45% alongside a separate 20.6% stake directly in Rimac Group itself. On paper, it looked like a clean partnership, Bugatti's century of craftsmanship meeting Rimac's cutting-edge electric expertise, with Porsche's engineering weight anchoring the whole thing. For a while, that arrangement worked exactly as intended. It gave Bugatti a path forward that didn't require going fully electric overnight, and it gave Rimac credibility and scale that a young Croatian company couldn't have built on its own nearly as quickly. Then, in April 2026, Porsche did something almost nobody in the industry predicted. It agreed to walk away entirely. Not a partial sell-down, not a renegotiated stake to reduce exposure, a complete exit, divesting both its 45% holding in Bugatti Rimac and its 20.6% stake in Rimac Group, all in one transaction. The buyer was a consortium led by HOF Capital, a New York-based investment firm managing more than $10 billion in assets, with Blue 5 Capital stepping in as the largest single investor alongside a group of institutional backers spread across the US and EU. The reasoning Porsche gave publicly was straightforward enough. A renewed focus on its core business, amid broader financial pressure across the group. Reading between the lines, that's corporate language for a simple truth. Bugatti Rimac had become a side bet, and Porsche needed to tighten its portfolio rather than keep funding ventures that sat outside its main lineup. Porsche had been navigating its own turbulence, including a sharp pullback from an earlier EV-heavy strategy.
Within the Porsche context, this is technically the cheapest way to get over 600 horsepower from a brand new Porsche currently. If you want that same amount of power or more in any other car in the lineup, you'll be spending tens of thousands of dollars more.
And mounting pressure from tariffs and softening demand in key markets. Against that backdrop, an ultra-low-volume brand like Bugatti, historically producing fewer than 100 cars a year, becomes an easy target when a balance sheet needs tidying up. It's also worth noting who's actually stepping in to fill that gap. Blue 5 Capital, the largest investor in the incoming consortium, brings backing tied to Abu Dhabi, adding to a broader pattern of Middle Eastern capital moving into European luxury and performance brands in recent years. Combine that with HOF Capital's $10 billion plus portfolio and its track record of backing category-defining companies early, and you get a very different kind of ownership group than the traditional automaker-to-automaker arrangement that originally built Bugatti Rimac. This isn't old-world manufacturing money changing hands. It's the kind of capital that tends to move fast and expect faster returns. There's also a detail that adds an unexpected layer to the story. Mate Rimac had reportedly floated interest in buying out Porsche's stake even before this deal materialized, with early estimates valuing the joint venture at slightly over €1 billion. In other words, this wasn't simply an opportunity that fell into his lap. It was something he'd been positioning for. But intent aside, the practical effect of this deal is what actually matters here. Once the transaction closes, expected before the end of 2026, pending regulatory clearance, Rimac Group takes full operational control of Bugatti Rimac. Not a majority stake with a powerful minority partner still holding leverage in the boardroom. Full control. Mate Rimac, who serves as CEO of Bugatti Rimac, described the shift in fairly measured terms, saying the new structure allows the company to execute faster on its long-term plans. That's a polite way of describing what amounts to a genuine power consolidation. For the first time since this joint venture began, there's no legacy German automaker in the room to slow things down, push back in direction, or pull the brand toward a more conservative strategy. To really appreciate why that distinction matters, you need to understand what having a partner like Porsche in the room actually costs a company in terms of speed and independence, and what removing that partner suddenly unlocks. The rise of a hypercar empire. Joint ventures sound collaborative in theory. In practice, they're often a constant negotiation between competing priorities. Porsche, as a 45% stakeholder, wasn't just a passive investor collecting a return. A stake that size comes with real influence, a say in strategic direction, product timelines, risk tolerance, and how aggressively a brand like Bugatti could push into unfamiliar territory. Every major decision had to satisfy not just Rimac's vision for the brand, but Porsche's appetite for risk as a much larger, more conservative parent company navigating its own priorities. That kind of oversight isn't necessarily a bad thing. It often provides stability, credibility, and a safety net during turbulent periods. But it also means compromise. And compromise, by definition, slows down how boldly a company can move. Now imagine removing that layer entirely. With Porsche gone, Rimac Group doesn't just own a bigger slice of Bugatti Rimac, it owns the entire decision-making apparatus behind it. Every product decision, every strategic pivot, every long-term bet on where hypercar engineering should go next, now flows through one leadership structure instead of two competing corporate philosophies. Add in HOF Capital and Blue 5 Capital as new financial partners rather than automotive rivals with their own competing product lines, and you get a structure built almost entirely around funding Rimac's vision rather than tempering it. This is where the story stops being about ownership percentages and starts being about something much bigger: concentration of vision. Mate Rimac isn't just the CEO steering Bugatti's next chapter. He's simultaneously the founder and president of the Rimac Group, which also owns 100% of Rimac Technology, the company supplying advanced electric powertrains and battery systems to manufacturers across the industry, including, notably, Koenigsegg itself. Rimac Technology has quietly become a supplier that even its rivals depend on for high-performance electric components, alongside major names like Porsche, Hyundai, and Aston Martin. That last detail deserves a moment of its own. Rimac Technology isn't some obscure side project tucked away in a corner of the balance sheet. It's a genuine Tier 1 automotive supplier, embedded deep enough in the industry that pulling its components out of a rival's product line would be genuinely disruptive. Koenigsegg, relying on parts and systems developed by a company under Mate Rimac's leadership, isn't a minor footnote. It's a dependency that existed well before this Porsche deal, and one that now sits inside a much larger, more concentrated organization. Think about the layers here for a second. One individual now has deep operational control over Bugatti's combustion and hybrid legacy, full ownership of an electric hypercar brand that's been outperforming Koenigsegg on pure numbers, and a technology arm that helps power some of Koenigsegg's own vehicles. That's not just influence over one side of a two-brand rivalry. That's influence woven through multiple threads of the entire hypercar ecosystem at once. It's the kind of position that would have sounded almost implausible a decade ago, when Rimac was still a small operation trying to convince skeptical investors that an electric hypercar wasn't a contradiction in terms. Now that same company sits at the center of decisions affecting Bugatti's product roadmap, Koenigsegg's supply chain, and the broader direction electric hypercar performance is heading in globally. That kind of consolidation rarely happens by accident. and it rarely happens quickly either. It usually takes years of quietly building leverage, cultivating the right relationships, and waiting for the right moment when a larger, more conservative partner decides it's ready to step back. Porsche's exit gave Rimac exactly that moment, and he was clearly ready for it. There's a smaller but telling detail that lines up with this shift too. Back in February 2026, Mate Rimac stepped down from his day-to-day role as CEO of Rimac Technology.
Joined here today by Mate Rimac, who is founder of the Rimac Group and CEO of Bugatti Rimac.
Handing that position to Nerden Petarevich, the company's former chief operating officer, while Rimac stayed on as president of the wider Rimac Group. On its own, that might have looked like a minor reshuffle. In hindsight, it reads like someone clearing his schedule ahead of exactly the kind of full-time focus that running Bugatti Rimac, without a partner looking over his shoulder, would demand. Which brings us to the part of this story that actually predates the entire Porsche deal, and arguably matters even more. The real battle was won on the track. Here's something that gets lost in all the corporate deal coverage. Rimac didn't need to acquire Bugatti to start winning against Koenigsegg. It had already been doing that on the track. The Nevera R, Rimac's flagship electric hypercar, has spent recent seasons quietly dismantling a set of acceleration benchmarks that Koenigsegg had spent years building its reputation around. In a widely discussed track day where Christian von Koenigsegg and Mate Rimac drove each other's cars, the context alone said plenty. Rimac showed up fresh off pulling several of Koenigsegg's own acceleration records, in a car that didn't rely on a single drop of fuel to do it. Producing north of 2,000 horsepower, the Nevera R doesn't just compete on paper against combustion-powered rivals. It's been engineered specifically to dominate the exact metrics, 0 to 60, 0 to 100, quarter-mile times, that hypercar bragging rights have traditionally been built on. Think about what those numbers actually represent for a second. These aren't marginal improvements measured in hundredths of a second that only enthusiasts obsess over. In several cases, the Nevera R's runs weren't close calls. They were decisive enough that comparisons to Koenigsegg's own record-setting machines stopped being a fair fight almost entirely. For a manufacturer that spent its entire existence being the fastest name in the room, that's not a footnote. That's a direct challenge to the one thing the brand has always been able to claim as uniquely its own. That's a genuinely different kind of blow than a corporate ownership shift. A business deal changes who holds the paperwork. A record broken on a runway changes what an entire brand's reputation is actually built on. For years, Koenigsegg's identity has rested heavily on being the outfit that pushes past what anyone thought was physically possible in a production car. A relentless, almost mythical pursuit of the next record. Having that exact territory challenged by an electric rival, using a completely different kind of powertrain altogether, cuts closer to the brand's core than most people realize. And here's the part that makes this especially uncomfortable for anyone rooting purely for combustion-era spectacle. Rimac's approach to setting these records.
This might be the world's most advanced car factory, and who better for a tour guide than Mate Rimac himself. Thank you very much for having us.
Isn't a stunt built for a single viral run. The company has increasingly focused on repeatable, track-consistent performance, rather than chasing one perfect number under ideal conditions. That shift matters, because it suggests these aren't fluke results destined to be reclaimed the following year. They're built on an engineering philosophy designed to hold up under repeated scrutiny, the kind of consistency that's much harder to dismiss as a one-off marketing stunt. It's a subtle but important distinction that a lot of casual coverage skips right past. Plenty of hypercars have claimed a headline number once, under perfect weather, on a perfectly prepped surface, and then quietly disappeared from the conversation once nobody could replicate it. The Nevera R's approach seems designed specifically to avoid that fate, to make the record something durable, rather than a lucky one-off that gets picked apart the following season. None of this happened in a vacuum either. Rimac Technology, the components arm mentioned earlier, has spent years supplying high-performance electric systems to major manufacturers across the industry, including Koenigsegg. So there's a genuinely strange irony sitting underneath this entire rivalry. Some of the very technology helping power Koenigsegg's own vehicles traces back to a company now run by the same person steering Bugatti's future. Sit with that irony for a moment, because it's easy to breeze past. Koenigsegg has spent decades building a reputation on independence, on refusing to rely on anyone else's parts bin, on inventing rather than sourcing. And yet, somewhere in its own supply chain, there's technology tracing back to the very company that just out-accelerated it and then went on to absorb its oldest historic rival. Layer the Porsche exit on top of an already established performance edge, and the picture becomes clearer. This isn't a story about one deal suddenly creating dominance out of nothing. It's a story about a company that had already been closing the gap on the track, just gaining full control of the other historic name in that same fight. Two separate advantages, arriving from completely different directions, converging into a single position of strength at almost exactly the same moment. Which raises the obvious question everyone watching this space has been asking since the ink dried on that agreement. One deal that changed everything. So, does this actually end anything? On paper, it's hard to argue against the scale of what just happened. One individual now sits atop Bugatti's combustion and hybrid heritage through the Tourbillon program.
They retired it while it was still the most powerful combustion engine ever fitted to a production car. 16 cylinders, 4 turbochargers.
Owns the electric hypercar brand that's already been beating Koenigsegg's own numbers, and controls a technology supplier that Koenigsegg itself reportedly relies on for parts of its own performance systems. That's not a minor shift in the balance of power. That's something closer to holding both decks of cards in a game that used to require two separate players. But ending a rivalry this old isn't quite as simple as consolidating ownership. Koenigsegg is still an independent, privately run operation, unburdened by shareholder pressure from a joint venture and free to pursue whatever engineering direction Christian von Koenigsegg wants, without needing sign-off from anyone outside his own company. Independence has its own kind of power. The freedom to take risks nobody else would greenlight. The ability to chase a record purely because it's technically fascinating rather than commercially necessary. That scrappy, obsessive spirit has carried Koenigsegg through plenty of moments where bigger, better-funded rivals seemed poised to overshadow it. Still, there's a meaningful difference between competing against a fully independent rival and competing against a company that now controls your parts supplier, your closest heritage competitor, and the electric benchmark you're being measured against, all at once. Even if Koenigsegg keeps innovating exactly as fiercely as it always has, the landscape it's innovating within has shifted underneath it. There's a useful comparison here to how other industries have handled similar moments of consolidation. When one player in a competitive field suddenly gains outsized influence over shared infrastructure, whether that's parts, technology, or talent, it doesn't necessarily eliminate competition outright, but it does change the terms of engagement. Everyone else has to factor in a new kind of dependency that didn't exist before, and that dependency shapes decisions in ways a simple spec sheet comparison never could. Maybe war was never quite the right word to begin with. Wars imply two roughly equal sides locked in ongoing conflict. What's forming here looks less like a battlefield and more like a single company quietly becoming the center of gravity that the rest of the industry has to orbit around, whether they intended to or not. Bugatti brings the heritage and the spectacle.
Here we are, guys, with the Bugatti Tourbillon, and let me tell you all the insane facts about this masterpiece.
Rimac brings the record-breaking electric performance and the underlying technology, and Koenigsegg, for now, is left proving that independence alone is still enough to stay relevant against a rival that's suddenly playing a much bigger game than anyone expected. Whether that's actually true will play out over the next few years, as the Porsche deal closes, as the Tourbillon reaches full production, and as Koenigsegg responds. Because a company built on stubborn originality rarely goes quiet just because the landscape shifted. If anything, moments like this tend to provoke exactly the kind of engineering defiance Koenigsegg has built its entire reputation on. But right now, at this exact moment, one person controls more of this rivalry than anyone in the hypercar world ever has before. So is the Bugatti-Koenigsegg war actually over, or did it just quietly change shape? Right now, both are true. Mate Rimac controls Bugatti's heritage, owns the EV brand already beating Koenigsegg's records, and runs the tech supplier Koenigsegg depends on. That's not a small tilt in power. That's one man holding both sides of a board that used to need two players. But Koenigsegg's never gone quiet just because the odds shifted. Independence has a habit of surprising everyone. So here's the real question. Does this end the rivalry or start a bigger one? Drop your take below and subscribe, because the fastest cars on Earth are about to answer that for us. Answer that for us. Answer that for us. Answer that.